Hey, this is your favorite professor, Dr. Esa again. So today we're going to continue with the third lesson in Greek, and we're going to look at the prepositions and the verb to be. I also added a new section, just a brief introduction to the verbs. So we're going to take a look at that as well. So let's start with the prepositions. We already mentioned that earlier, but just briefly, prepositions in English indicates the relationship of two words in a sentence, direction of action, and location of action. And obviously, this may sound a little bit abstract, but let's take some examples. The book is on the table. The book is beneath the table, obviously indicating the location. And the book is under him. And as you can see here, when the preposition is followed by a pronoun, it is in objective case or it's a direct object. As we will see also in Greek, some of the prepositions take different case endings depending on the preposition. So here we see a slight similarity between English and Greek prepositions. Then the verb to be in English briefly. So let's take an example. Which is the correct way to say in English? The professor is him or the professor is he? Well, you guessed it right. The professor is he, or maybe you already knew when you have the verb to be in English, we're using the word he rather than him when the pronoun is connected with the grammatical construction called the predicate nominative. So to be tells something about the subject and therefore it's not direct object. So we call this grammatically predicate nominative. Not hugely important to remember the terminology, but we will see that it actually is quite important to remember this rule when we look at the Greek verb to be. So as I alluded to earlier, Greek prepositions can be actually quite complicated. The basic ideas are not difficult because they tend to function in a very similar way than the English prepositions. However, a Greek preposition can be used with 1, 2, or 3 different case endings. For example, with the accusative or dative or genitive. So let's take some examples so that you can see what I mean. And to remind again, the meaning of the preposition depends on the case of its object. So for example, if we have the preposition dia and it is followed by a word in genitive case, it means through. Now, if dia is followed by a word in accusative case, it is because of. So you can right away understand how the meaning of the word or the preposition actually is dependent on the case ending of the following word. And let's take some examples here. Let me read the Greek text for you. Ho logos erketai eis ton kosmon. So we can see here the translation of this sentence. The word goes or comes into the world. Ho logos is the word. Erketai is a verb that can mean either come or go. And then here we have the preposition eis, into or to, and ton kosmon is the world. And here is also the breakdown, ho logos erketai ton kosmon. These are not really relevant, these lines here. They're just to break down the sentence into the 3 different parts. And here you can see very often the Greek sentence does not have the article between the noun and the preposition. So that's the basic way that the prepositions function. However, we can also have a preposition that is attached to a verb, and we would call it a compound verb. So you can see here the verb blepo, I see, and then the preposition dia, most often it is translated as through, but we could also have a compound verb that is dia blepo. So meaning of the verb usually changes, and most often it intensifies when we go from blepo to dia blepo, from a regular verb to a compound verb. So blepo means I see, and dia blepo means I see through. English has some similarities or analogies. So we can say house burns, or we can say house burns up. So house burns, it is burning, maybe just the burning started, but when you say the house burns up, it actually means that the whole thing has burned down. So it is more intense way of saying the same thing. So here's a little picture or a diagram that gives you an understanding and a visual aid to understand and memorize the Greek prepositions. Now, this is not an exhaustive list and certainly does not include all the nuances when a preposition is followed by one case ending or another one. But let me take some examples. So you can see here, pros, followed by accusative. As you can see, the arrow is pointing towards. You take eis, followed by accusative, into. Dia, followed by genitive, is through. Hypo, followed by accusative, is underneath. Ek, followed by genitive, is out of. And apo, also followed by genitive, is away from. Epi, followed by genitive, is upon. And also you can see hyper, followed by accusative, is above. Now, just as an example, if you take hyper with accusative, as I said, it means above. But if you have hyper followed by genitive, it would mean in behalf of. Or you take peri, followed by accusative, is around. Maybe you can remember peri plus accusative if you think about perimeter, something that goes around. So peri followed by accusative is around. But if you have peri followed by genitive, it is about or concerning. Now, you have a small chart in your textbook on page 75, and also the vocabulary gives you the meaning and the prepositions, prepositions with different case endings, and then the translation of each one. So that is very important for you to start learning and memorizing. Now, as I said, prepositions in its basic form are easy, but when we read them in context and we come across different prepositional phrases and different case endings, they can actually be quite difficult to translate. Here's another little cartoon that may help you visually learn the prepositions. I will not go through that further, but you can explore that yourself. Next, we have something that is called elision. Not hugely important to memorize, but important to be aware of. So a preposition may drop the final vowel, or does drop a final vowel before a word beginning with vowel. So let's look at it. So we have this regular example of meta auton, with him, but when we have the alpha at the end of the preposition followed by a word that starts with a vowel, then you can see that the vowel at the end of the preposition actually elides or drops. So we have met auton, with him. Meaning does not change, it's just that the letter drops or there's a elision, so it looks a bit different. So you just have to be careful not to confuse this met to some other word. So then we have another example, the same preposition meta, when it's followed by a vowel that has a rough breathing mark. So you can see that it's not meta or met, but meth. So hemon is us or we. So meth hemon, with us. So this is just to be aware of, no need to memorize, but just to be conscious of the little changes. It's somewhat similar as we have in English when we say I do not, or we would say I don't. Has some similarities. So before we close off today, let's look at a couple of things regarding verbs. So in Greek verbs, we have the stem and the personal ending. Functions very similarly as the Spanish or Portuguese. So those who are familiar with those languages are able to get the idea very quickly. So we have the verb luo with the stem lu and personal ending omega. So this is what you would find in your vocabulary and in your dictionary. So we say luo, and if we analyze it grammatically or we parse it, it is present, active, indicative, first person singular. But we'll get to those things later. Here I am just introducing the subject and the grammatical terms. Now you don't need to memorize this chart yet. It will be coming in a couple of weeks' time, but it's important to be aware of since we're looking also at the verb to be in the next slide or so. So here you can see the singular verb luo, I lose. Notice there's no personal pronoun here, which you see here in English, I. It just has the verb luo, and as in Spanish and Portuguese and many other languages, the pronoun is embedded here in the verb. And then the omega indicates to you that this is actually first person singular, meaning that it is I who is doing the losing. So I lose. Then when we go to the next example, lu ace, you lose. And again, you can see that the ace indicates that it is you singular, not singular and plural as in English, but you singular. That is indicated by the ending ace. Next one, we have lu a, and again, the epsilon iota, a indicates that it is he, she, or it loses. So we don't have a specific feminine form of the third person singular or masculine form or the neuter form. Then we look at the plural verbs. Lu omen, we have we lose. Lu ete, you lose, plural. And then lu usin, they lose. So you can see that each one of the endings circled by red indicates who is actually doing the action, and the stem remains the same, lu. So finally here you can see the chart for the verb to be. Now, just what I said about the verb luo with the stem and the personal endings is actually going to be a little bit different here when we talk about the verb to be. Now, as the verb to be in English is irregular, and the same is the case in Greek. So if you look at the singular one, which basically means singular first person or I, the verb to be is eimi. So this would mean I am. Now notice that your vocabulary and a basic dictionary would always have the first person singular in the dictionary or in a vocabulary. So you would not have the participle or the infinitive or something like that in your Greek dictionary as the model verb. So this is what you would find in the dictionary. So, but when you start looking at the other form, singular second person or you singular, it looks quite different. It is a with the smooth breathing mark and circumflex on top of the word or on top of the iota. Then third person he, she, it is estin, esmen, we are, este, you are, and esin, they are. Now notice here we have the men and the te and the si that actually do conform to the pattern that we indicated earlier. So if you think about le omen, le ete, le usi. So we have some similarities, but especially the three first forms are actually irregular as they conjugate in this verb to be. So this is actually something that is important to memorize because this doesn't follow your regular pattern of the verbs. So that's it for today. So to practice the prepositions and the verb to be, check the workbook, complete the page 19, the parsing and the warm-up, and then complete the translation on page 21, sentences 7 and 8. You can also do more, but that should be the minimum. All right, I'll see you next time.